I'd like to call the Strategic Planning Committee meeting July 12th, 2022 to order. Everybody stand up. I've asked Coach to lead the invocation pledge.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we come at this hour in the evening, come, Lord, to truly say we thank you for the many blessings you bestowed upon each of us. Father, we ask, Lord, that you guide us through this meeting. We ask, Father, that you bless this parish of Ascension. We ask, Lord, that you continue to guide, lead, and direct us in such a mighty way. And Father God, as we leave this place tonight, Lord, we ask that you allow each of us to get home safe and sound to our families. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You should have told me, dude. All right, any public speakers that we have, if you could grab one of the green cards or red cards and fill them out and just hand them over to Jaren, that'd be great. Are there green cards up there? The cards are over here, I'm sorry. Dude, I'm just, you only have to tell me 4 times.
I was gonna write it down.
All right, we can start off on our first item, discussion of allocating funds to each district at councilman's discretion for drainage, roads, and infrastructure per set guidelines. Now, I sat down with Mr. Goldsmith. We've had some discussion about this. His main concern was not using the money properly and, having what they consider in the legislature like a slush fund or something. So we sat down and we took some different precautions that I think could solve this. This backs up to whenever we approved the $1 million project for, what was the subdivision? Shadows, Touchdown Shadows, was it?
I think that was it.
Yeah, and whenever we discussed that, I made a comment then that, the only reason I'm going to approve this for one district at this price point is because I think it's something we should do across the board. Because of the budget reasons, and we obviously have to look more at the budget, we're not going to be able to start this, running out the doors. I'm thinking a ultimate budget to be able to do one round of the project is $10 million. That would be $1 million per district. But as Patrick and I were talking, we're not going to do all the projects at once. It's going to take time to vet the projects. There's going to be all the criteria you have to meet. So if we do it correctly, we could have each councilman put in their request. The request is going to have to meet the guidelines, kind of like the one we approved already. It'll have to deal with road and or drainage. We'll kind of tweak those out. Once we have each councilman has the project and it meets the checklist and the guidelines, it still has to come before the council for us to vote on it. But before that, it's actually what we kind of discussed today, and this is more of the way to keep the checks and balances in place. Since we're not going to have $10 million to put in it the first year, we're going to have the administration or someone with the administration deciding which of these projects to pick per year. Now, ultimately, when we get enough money in the fund, it would be great to be able to do it once a year or even every other year. But the reason that we're going to keep this across the board and fair is because whomever gets the first one or the second one or the third one, they will not get another dollar through this fund until all the districts get their $1 million. Then you start back over. The reason I want to do this is because we have priority list for the different jobs that we do throughout the parish. The administration has been really good about looking at the numbers, putting the data out there, and making decisions. But they have certain developments and certain people that kind of slip through the cracks with this. You have your established development that's been there for a long time. In particular, the one I'm talking about, or that I would like to submit for me, would be Pelican Point. It's an older subdivision. It's got some problems with the road, with the drainage, and it's an asset to the community, an asset to the parish. But when you look at the priorities and you look at the numbers and you look at the system that we're doing now, that's not coming up on it's not going to come up. So I guess I'm going to open up the floor, see what y'all's suggestions are.
I just have questions. So you said $10 million. Well, there's 11 districts. So is District 11 not getting $1 million?
Well, this would have to be drainage, because this is drainage funds.
So you would do it from the.
So we
okay,
would
but
do.
what if I did traffic?
Coach
though?
and I would do a West Bank.
What if I wanted to do one on roads? You said roads.
Well, that's why we have to come with the discussion, and we can put that criteria and that guideline there.
Okay.
Patrick's going to help us do that, to look at the budget and see where we may have the funds to be able to allocate for the next budget year.
Okay.
Also, I think it would behoove us to look and see what type of grant money we can get for each of these projects, whether it be a criteria that you have to have a certain amount of grant money for us to pick the project, or that has to do with the, the order or the first one's done, the ones that have money that we have a possibility of losing. We could have any type of match money or something.
What if you don't spend the full $1 million?
You have a certain amount of time. I'm thinking within that first year would be all you need to at least figure out what project you have and have something submitted. If you don't have a project submitted, that money's going to go back into the pot and you lost it. Or it can go to a different fund that we create, and at a later time, it could be done with one of the other districts. I don't know. But you can't sit there and just sit on the money and not use it, is my point, or my thoughts.
Okay. I'll let Ms. Terry go and then I'll come back.
So,
Well, go ahead and go with Coach.
so the
Just
money
because you
that
said
you're
that.
spending, the money that you're talking about spending, Joe, is, only could be spent on drainage and roads?
Well, that's up for discussion. I think it would be best to be only on drainage and roads. And when I say drainage and roads, I mean combined. And I also believe it needs to be on one project, maybe two projects. We can't have DPW going through all over the districts and doing 20 projects, because, that's just too much. It's not the point of this.
So what if I want to spend 500,000 on roads and spend the other 500 on drainage?
Well, the way that we're looking to have these projects allocated is it's going to be a one consuming project. Like the one that we did for, I want to say it was Shadows of Dutchtown, I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like
Yeah, whichever one we voted for, it was for the good of all the development. It was an older development, and the fault was basically from the developer.
Mhm.
They created a dry retention pond or something to that extent. Developer's not in business anymore, so they were stuck, and I believe I've talked to each councilman, and I believe we all have problems in our district that we could put this money toward. Like I said, if you don't put it back in the pot, and then the other project's gonna be done quicker.
No, I would think every councilman would have a need within their district to be able to spend $1 million to improve somewhere in their district, that they can enlighten some area that they need to get done. So,
And a lot of your road stuff is gonna go along with your road or in the road drainage. Because, if you're picking up cross culverts, cross drains, any type of culvert under the roadway, you gotta excavate the roadway, so that kind of has to overlap.
all right, that sounds good to me.
Thank you, Joel. It's interesting discussion. So my recollection about the project that neither of us can think of the name of the subdivision is there was also some responsibility on the part of the parish for having approved a drainage system that didn't function properly. So in my mind, certainly there would have to be some
Stipulation.
some stipulation, some guideline around that there had to be something that had been done that maybe wasn't working well. But, that's,
And
that
that
can
kind
come
of goes
later.
along with all our culverts and things that were approved
Right.
before, and they're not anymore.
They were sufficient at the time, they're not
Exactly.
sufficient anymore. A question I had was, could a councilman in your mind contribute that $1 million to a major project in their district that the parish is already doing, if they wanted to?
I
If
think
they
it would
didn't
be a
have
great
something
idea,
else.
as long as, see, the main concern that we have, that Patrick has with the money, is that it's not spent for what is ultimately intended to be spent for.
Right.
So if you want that, and I agree, that could be a great option for the money because it's still being spent in your district. We could put that along the checklist of different criteria, what would qualify or not qualify. I think that could work great. And I also agree with where the parish. I mean, we have so many things that are against code now, against code today that were not years and years ago. Your road bases, your fluorolite, I mean, they still use some forms of fluorolite, but it's a different mixture because the other types fail. I think that could help us narrow down the projects within each district.
Yeah, personally, I mean, I think it's an excellent idea if it's got a lot of rails on it.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to kind of add my 2 cents, and thanks for speaking with me today about this. I know it's got a lot of moving parts. And as you said, my first concern is that we make sure we're following the priorities for the parish. As you said, the state did this a while back. I was actually part of the audit that kind of delved into this. And what had happened is it had turned into what the press called a slush fund. And obviously, we don't want that. So that's where I started thinking about the dollar amounts, and you had mentioned, 10 million or a different dollar amount. Right now, we're trying to work on that multi-year budgeting, and we have plans right now, and I wouldn't want to take from priorities that y'all have already approved in the budget with those capital projects to fund other things that may not rise to those priority levels. And I know there's a pull between the council members' priorities, obviously, and the parish priorities. And so that's where my thought, at least for this year, would be kind of like what the state does, is have each council member submit their priority list to us. We're about to start the budgeting process. In July, August, we're going to be hitting this really hard. And so this would be the perfect time to get those drainage projects. It could be transportation projects. Maybe they fall into what the existing plans already are, which would be great. Maybe they don't, and then they can be added to the consideration. But it seems like having those submitted would kind of be a great starting point so that we can consider those. You asked about a dollar amount. It's kind of hard without going through the budget and doing this 5-year plan, because we have the expenditure side, but we haven't put the revenue side, and that's what we're trying to do this year. So when are we going to theoretically run out of money for transportation? I know that's a concern. The money's not going to last forever. Drainage, how long does it take us? And again, we're not talking about the capital side. I think we're just talking about the maintenance side. Mm-hmm. And so that would be another consideration. What is out there? Because those aren't specifically laid out in the budget, but obviously there's plans moving forward. So I guess my thought, my recommendation would be, at least for the short term, because there's so many moving parts to this, is if we could start off in the next couple months, let's get a priority list from every council member so that we can consider that, and the administration maybe we can get those projects in this year. Because I would think trying to come up with these parameters could take a while. What projects are worthy? What details do we need to be included on the list? And I just wouldn't want to miss an opportunity, since the budget's going to happen fast with us here in the next few months. Y'all know how that goes. And so my recommendation would be, let's start off, let's get a priority list, and you can even set a dollar amount of, look, come up with $500,000 to $1 million of priorities. What's important to you in these areas, so that we can make sure we include those.
So I don't know about everybody else's district, but in mine, traffic issues are so expensive that $1 million is not going to help it's not going to solve my problem. Even on, and I think that's true of most drainage issues as well, other than culverts and things like that, which I think this is a great application for that. But I think those are getting done anyway. On the priority of the drainage department. So, I hate to throw another wrinkle in this, but I tell you what I need. I've got a spray park I've been trying to get done for 10 years. I've got the library giving me the money, the property for it. We've got the money for it. We can't get it built for other reasons, supply chain and all of that. But we also have the additional property in the back that if we just went ahead now and did that spray park and added that nature trail, that's $500,000 that you'd have a finished project, and that is unlikely to get finished any other way. You know, it's not going to be anybody else's priority, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why it's not the administration's priority. It's strictly something that a councilman feels is especially important in their district for quality of life. So I kind of, as I think about this, I think that some of the ways that we improve quality of life with this, which is where our councilman usually is more centered, is in recreation and what's available for our young
Absolutely.
people and other folks. So, you know, I hate to say I came in here thinking, well, I don't know if I like that, and now I think I like it, but I want it to include I want it to include more things.
And I'm going to agree with you on that, Terry, in the sense of, well, we'll see how he thinks about the discretion of the funds to make sure it meets certain guidelines. But if we're able to spread it across different departments, we're able to spread it across different budgets.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back to my comment of giving us your priorities. You're right, you don't have to limit it to drainage. You don't have to limit it to transportation. If your priority, and look, I understand working for 105 House members,
We're gonna have to
I knew
make 11
everyone's
million then.
priorities, and they were all different.
Yeah.
And so yours may be recreation. We know some people's are transportation, that maybe you're sitting in the audience. And so we want to make sure we get those. So maybe that's the better idea of, look, here's the departments, submit the project. If that $500,000 is your number one priority, that would be good to know when we're making the budget. Because we are looking, we're trying to find more money for recreation. And if they do find more money, or if the sales tax are higher and that 25% funds a little bit more, maybe that's a potential. But if we don't know those, and they're not written down and given to us, it just makes it harder to try to make sure we get your priorities as well. So I don't think it would be bad for us to just give us your priorities for, obviously not promising we can do everything, but at least we all know what you're interested in.
Well, I think like one of my kind of things I'm thinking about now is where is this money coming from?
Well, that's
It's
what we're
gonna-
going to have to figure out.
Yeah, because that's going to have to come
That's
from
later on
somewhere.
the
So
road.
like,
Yes.
like for example, like if I say I want to take my 1 million and put it towards, like Ms. Terry, want to put a nice park in District 11, that'd be great. But like if I could, I'd probably put that money towards transportation to finish the airline and Germany Road intersection, because that's the biggest thing in my district right now. Plus, it would make Aaron really happy if I did that. But again, I think that's kind of my thing though, is like if I'm taking money out of Move Ascension because I want to do one project that's transportation, then that's not going to work. Like I'm not going to be a big fan of that, because
Well,
that,
you wouldn't take that out of Move Ascension. It would have to
but I'm
be-
saying out of transportation though, like if that money came out of transportation or money that could be allocated from transportation to Move Ascension or something like that, that's where I would not feel comfortable. Or like if we want to do a drainage project and that budget that would come out of our drainage budget that could be used to do something, a bigger project, that's where I would kind of feel uncomfortable about it as well. So that's one thing for sure that I would like to know, is where specifically is that, like, are we doing a sales tax? Are we going to do, a property tax? But it's got to come from somewhere. That's my concern.
Well, what I'm looking at, what we're looking at doing is not doing any more taxes, not doing any more property tax, nothing. But whenever you're doing a budget, especially if you're talking about doing a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year budget, you can budget out these projects and you can budget out this money with what
But that
you
money's
actually
coming
have.
from somewhere.
It is coming from somewhere, and these
That's
projects
my
are
concern.
eventually being done.
Yeah.
One of my main purposes behind this is to spread across the whole parish, because throughout each administration and throughout each council, you always have a tendency for some districts to have more stuff done than other districts. And that's just a fact. So whether this is a program that we don't overturn, or we don't do another round for 5 years or 10 years until we get the money, at least we're starting and we're putting the wheels in progress. Let's say it's $1 million each, but we can only do one project every year, or even one project every 2 years, until we start getting some funding source or something from that. And we can also look at the match money, make that a big incentive of it. Also, with recreation, there will always be that extra quality of life, like Terry's saying, to add there. We have a lot of recreation dollars that could be spent in rural areas, or not just in your main centralized places. I mean, I love Lamar Dixon and all the places that we have, but if we had each district say, okay, we can do this and do that, and it's just opening up that door to have each councilman have a little bit more say-so for the projects. It's not necessary, or it's not going to take money from something that we need somewhere else. We obviously have to find that.
That's why I like Patrick's idea of us submitting our list of projects to administration and them kind of saying, okay, we can look at it this way and say, put a splash pad. and
So would y'all be
chairs.
good if we, let's send this back to this committee? That'll give us some time to talk about it amongst yourselves, get some of the guidelines we want to get. whomever wants to sit down with myself and Patrick, we can sit down and kind of get some more, idea of the numbers and where we're going to be, and bring it back next time.
Yeah.
We'll give it a couple months so we can give everybody time, because we got a lot of stuff going on. And we'll give everybody some time to get their lists in, and, I mean.
Well, no, we're just talking about for discussion, for this.
Well, yeah, but I'd like to see what everybody's lists are.
Well, you're not allowed to see the list.
I'm
Can you
vice
not
chair,
see the list,
sir.
please?
Vice chair.
Well, and I did want to add, Councilman Mason, your concern was my concern as well, and we talked about drainage, because that was the original focus of this. And major drainage, their budget is $26 million right now. So depending on how much you take out of that for these priorities, again, you wouldn't want to stop parish priorities for something that maybe if you put it in with everything else, it doesn't rise to that level. It may be important to one or two councilmen, but, again, that's where we have to try to balance the limited funds. And so that was one of the problems we discussed of we don't want to take funds from ongoing projects, planned projects, or priority projects. So that's just something we'd have to make sure we don't do as we move forward.
And kind of with Mr. Goldsmith saying that brings up another one of my points. For my particular project, we're looking at Pelican Point, okay? Now, if we want to get technical and we want to look at tax revenue, and we want to look at dollars brought into this parish, Pelican Point's one of the larger, especially in my district, tax revenues,
But wouldn't
And it's
have to follow like the parish rules though, and just because, because didn't
why
John Paul
aren't
rule
we
last?
following rules?
Wouldn't John Paul rule last night that we
Well,
couldn't?
that was private property. This is all public. That was the Greens. This is Pelican Point.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the same thing. Okay, never mind, scratch that. Go ahead.
But yeah, let's just move it to the next meeting.
Okay,
Can we
that
have a
sounds good.
motion for that?
Motion.
Second.
Perfect.
Motion passes. What I'd like to do is a little change of the agenda, if y'all are good with it. We have some speakers here tonight, so if we could move item D between item A and B. Any objection to that? No objection?
No.
All right. All right, well, let's go to item D, discussion and possible resolution on regulating the sale of kratom. We have some public speakers on this item.
You do.
Let's see.
Time to you.
Yeah, but are they looking to speak? Yeah, they're speaking. So we have Todd Touye. And Mr. Todd is from the Sheriff's Department.
Yes, sir. How you doing, Ms. Casso, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Mason, Mr. Robert? Gentlemen, I don't like public speaking, so I apologize if I sound a little nervous.
It's not too much public here.
You only have 3 minutes anyway.
Today, I'm here to speak to you on behalf of another epidemic besides the opioid epidemic and fentanyl and all the stuff, which is what we call kratom. Okay, kratom is commonly sold in convenience stores. It comes from leaves from trees that are native to Southeast Asia. Okay, it's mainly 4 countries there. It's sold in liquid, pill, and powder form, and it's sold in convenience stores and what we call smoke shops, the vape shops, throughout our parish and state. All right, it comes into the country under the dietary supplement, which is not controlled by the FDA. So it can just come across the border. It has caught the attention of the DEA. It has caught the attention of FDA, which is doing studies, but there's not enough research and data to support anything for kratom. Kratom has the same effects of opioid brain receptors as morphine, which appears to have the same properties that expose users to addiction, abuse, and dependence. Some will say that it's great because the users want to use it for what they call self-detox. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's been in the drug business, especially in the detox and the rehab facilities, will tell you self-detox is not a good option. It's very, very seldom ever works. Okay, there are several states that have outlawed kratom. I think 5 or 6 states that in this country that have outlawed kratom. There are several counties, parishes, counties, cities, and towns across the country that has outlawed it. It is not currently outlawed anywhere in the state of Louisiana. All right, there are states. In my 14 years of narcotics investigations, all right, we have seen several substances sold which mimic the same effects as illegal narcotics. Mojo, which is synthetic marijuana, bath salts, is just a few of them to name. While conducting investigations over the years once the opioid epidemic, which is the heroin epidemic, came back into this state, one of the things we've commonly seen in our investigations dealing with individuals, citizens of our parish, is kratom. And we talked to them and we asked them, that's when we learned about kratom. In the law enforcement field, it's basically synthetic heroin. It has the same effects. If you look at the effects of it, it's pretty bad. I speak from personal experience. My daughter's here. She struggles. Excuse me. I met with Sheriff Weber on several occasions, and we spoke this morning. And he wanted me to pass along to y'all. He would like to see the parish of Ascension make it illegal to sell kratom in Ascension Parish. Thank you for your time and support, okay? If there's any questions y'all may have of me, I work for the Sheriff's Office. I've been there for 27 years. I've got some printouts that I made about kratom from the FDA, DEA, and a few other, the Mayo Clinic, and a few other ones. I'll leave right here for y'all to make copies.
And if you don't mind, if you could bring it over to Jaron, he can
Yeah.
get his copies of it.
So-
You made several good points about it. In fact, I talked to John Paul, the parish attorney. He had a family emergency. He couldn't make it tonight. But some of the points he brought up, kratom was actually, had legislation to the federal level to become a Schedule I narcotic. The only reason that they didn't get that passed is apparently it was AKA is the name of it. So they formed a pact and raised a huge amount of money.
Yep.
And lobbied and stopped it from going through. So it's obviously a problem if they were going to make it a Schedule I narcotic. You know?
Yes, and that's not over. That fight's not over. It's just a matter of timing and getting it back on the table, because in my business, we deal with a lot of guys from DEA. We've worked hand in hand with DEA on a lot of cases here in Ascension Parish. It's bad stuff. I mean, I put it right up there with bath salts, and bath salts was bad enough to where the governor and then the Board of Health signed an emergency order. And, I mean, it's not illegal anywhere in Ascension Parish, in Louisiana. Well, Ascension Parish is the greatest parish in the state. Let's take the lead. Let's set the example.
And
Let's protect our future.
And I guess one of the major questions, which you have already answered in a situation like this, is if we do pass an ordinance or craft an ordinance to prevent the sale of kratom and possibly the possession of kratom in the parish, y'all would be able to enforce it and willing to enforce it.
100%. We'll gladly, the moment if y'all make this illegal, we will go and put all the stores and the smoke shops, we'll give them the documentation from the parish where it's a parish ordinance to make it illegal, and we will have discussions with them about removing it from their store. And just like we did with bath salts, after a short period of time, we will return to those locations, and it could lead to the citing of the owners of the establishments and also the seizing of any kratom-type products that we find in their facilities after that.
Absolutely. And, you know, this was brought to my attention. Personally, I went through treatment, got out of treatment in 2012. So the kratom was right about the cusp of that. I wasn't familiar with it. I didn't realize it was as big of an issue as it is until Aaron called me
Yes.
to tell me about it. I mean, they have detoxes that should require a medical detox. I mean, you're talking about seizures, you're talking about possibility of death of coming off of this stuff that you can buy at a gas station.
Yep.
But I appreciate it. We appreciate you speaking. And
Yep.
if we can call up our next speaker, Aaron Stenchville.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I am Erin Stanchfield, the Director of Lifehouse for Women in Gonzales. We are a treatment program. We run what you would call maybe a sober living with a program. We have an amazing men and women's program. I went to Arise for Mental Health in Ascension Parish about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was really excited to be able to be a part of that where we can help with mental illness in our parish, addiction, and different things like that. And probably about a week and a half after that, I was turning the corner going to the Ruth House, which is our intake house, and I saw a big Kratom banner, and immediately called Joel and said, what can we do about this? It's almost like an oxymoron. I mean, if we're sitting here trying to, as a parish, help people with mental issues and addiction, but yet we're going to sell something like this over the counter, where some of my girls are having to go in rehab centers for this. I mean, they are relapsing on Kratom. And so I just wanted to be able to bring this to y'all's attention that this is going on, and I just hope that maybe as a committee, as a parish, that we can come together and outlaw it.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
And as Erin is saying, after she had called me, I started looking at these stores. I mean, they're in all the windows. They're all over the place. And for instance, Ruth's house that she's talking about on Airline Highway, there's a store you can see across the street with a lit up sign that says Kratom. Same thing with the Grove in Sorrento, the treatment facility there. They have a store across the street with Kratom advertised. And you're right. I believe Ascension Parish is taking a lead in tackling mental health and drug addiction. So I appreciate that. We have Landry Touye.
Okay, just like my dad, I'm nervous too. So, I'm Landry Touye. August 18th of 2021, I went to my first ever detox because I was addicted to heroin, methamphetamines, benzos, and alcohol. I was released 5 days after. I had about 5 months sober, still hadn't picked up or used any substances. Then I found out about Kratom. In the drug world, you hear about Kratom seldomly, and when you do hear about it, people will say if you want to detox yourself to use Kratom, that it will help take some of the symptoms away. When I first started, I thought that it was okay because it was legal and it was sold literally everywhere. I had never heard anything bad about it. Even in recovery, some people will say, like, oh, it helps cure your cravings or whatever. But in reality, you're just fueling your addiction by being on it. I decided that I wanted to quit doing it after about a month and a half. And so one day I had just tried to stop, and then I had realized that I had developed the withdrawals, and it was absolutely terrible. I tried to quit, and let me go past. Kratom took as much from me as my full-blown addiction to heroin and methamphetamines. I had lost a job through it. I was stealing from my sister again. I had stole her card and was because my withdrawals were so bad, and was trying to get Kratom. I was a liar. I was everything I was in a regular, like, full-on addiction, you know? I had to go to detox in order to fully get off of it because it was not something I could do on my own. The first time I went to detox, I waited 2 days before I went when I was just on heroin. I waited 2 days before I went, and then I decided. But 4 hours after knowing I needed to go to detox, I was screaming and crying at my mom, begging her to take me. That's how much worse the detox is from Kratom. And I was willing to do anything that morning. Like, I was going to steal anything from my sister. And I know this is a court, I shouldn't be saying that, but I'm going to be honest. Like,
It can be. It can be.
but yeah, so
Yeah, you can steal from your sister.
but yeah, so instead of that, they detox you off of it like they would a normal opiate addiction. They do 5 to 7 days. But for me, I had only been on it for a month and a half, and they still had to keep me 7 days instead of 5. And before that, I was on heroin for probably about 2 years, or just opiates, and it eventually worked my way up. But it had developed, so 5 days for a normal withdrawal and 7 days for Kratom. Like, that just goes to show how bad. And when I first got there, they did an initial drug test, and when I hadn't picked up anything at this point, like, I hadn't done anything, not even any legal pills or anything like that. But when I got there, I failed my drug test for fentanyl as well as kratom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's what freaked me out because I was like, I swear, like, I have no reason to lie to y'all. I haven't done anything, but I failed. One hard thing for me that is being in recovery was before I knew about kratom, I could stop at a gas station because they don't sell heroin or methamphetamines over the counter, but they sell kratom. And now that I struggle with kratom addiction as well, on my bad days, it's like I can't even stop and feel safe at a gas station because they sell it everywhere. And now around here, they know me because I used to buy like $400 worth of kratom a day. And so, like, when they see me now, they're like, oh, you're not getting any kratom? Like, they told me that 3 nights ago. They were like, oh, you're not getting any? And I was like, well, no, I'm in recovery now. And they were like, oh, we do cheap deal for you. Like, so it just goes to show they care about the money. But I think kratom is just as harmful, if not worse, because it doesn't sound as bad as opiates or heroin. So anybody could go to the store and see it and pick it up and get an addiction just as I, you know?
Well,
But
I
that's
appreciate it, absolutely. We have one more speaker, Mr. Rick Morton.
Thank you. First, my name is Rick Morton. I do business development for the Grove Recovery Center. 3 weeks from Friday will be a year. We're out in Ascension, and truly blessed to be a part of the community out here. And thank you, young lady. Very moving. Recovery's tough, and kratom only makes it tougher. I have some of our folks at our Ascension campus and our medical team, if you can amuse me for a minute, wanted to write a letter because they wanted to speak to personally about this. Some of it's repetitive to what you had said about some of the history, but if you could, and then I'll share my personal thoughts of what we're dealing with. In most cases, kratom detoxers are in far worse condition than heroin abusers. It is difficult to help them achieve a tolerable comfort level. Often they leave during detox because they are so miserable. This places them at risk for overdose because they will use a dose of heroin or fentanyl right away. A typical kratom detoxer presents with facial flushing, tremors, restless discontent that they are unable to sit still. They are in tears, sweating profusely, begging us to make it stop. They are overstimulated yet exhausted. Their heart is pounding, blood pressure is dangerously elevated, and they have a fever and body aches. The risk of having a seizure is very high. They tried to detox themselves using an all-natural product marketed to them by misleading facts. Yet here they are, excruciating pain, scared for their life, and pushing limits and doing whatever we can to help them. Kratom is just an herb, they say. Let's look at some facts. Kratom, a plant native to Southeast Asia, has grown in popularity in the U.S. due to its natural stimulant and sedative effects. Kratom is not regulated by the FDA and is sold under many different trade names. It is not listed as a controlled substance by the DEA and can be found at gas stations, smoke, and novelty shops. Kratom has 0 approved medical uses. The FDA refused to approve it, 6 appeals, because studies show that it is a high rate of addiction. In 2019, the FDA issued warnings to kratom manufacturers stating, quote, simply selling these are unapproved kratom products with claims that they can treat opioid withdrawal and addiction and other serious medical conditions is a violation of federal law. Some may argue that the deaths related to kratom use occur far less than deaths from heroin. This is true, but the point of banning kratom products is to encourage people to seek medical treatment for addiction and more safely detox. Kratom users develop a tolerance to small doses quickly and require much larger amounts to achieve the same effects. With higher doses, the detrimental effects described above are likely. Our nurses at the Grove are on high alert the moment a kratom user walks in for admission. They begin preparing themselves and the client for a difficult road ahead. For these reasons, we're asking that you consider banning kratom in our parish, making it less accessible. We'll encourage substance users to seek real care, whether in the ER, mental health, hospital, or detox. Presenting a false alternative such as kratom is just delaying the inevitable truth, death from overdose. Working a program is the safest and most effective treatment for addiction. Our medical team wrote that in the last couple days. I can tell you personally, for those that transition from our treatment center from detox and inpatient, once they go into IOP, sober living, or go home and to continue their journey, far often the cry is that they come back and the story goes, I started with just Kratom. I started with just Kratom, because they're seeking comfort in something, and it's the most accessible comfort that they have, with the exception of alcohol. And in my experience over the last few years, is what has happened is that the parallels between alcohol is, for lack of a better word, a gateway to a harder drug, a more fatal drug, is becoming more parallel with Kratom. Because the side effects alone are dangerous, but also it leads for folks like this young lady to just advance towards heroin again or meth, and which is ultimately just fentanyl on our streets these days anyway. Sadly enough, also the testing for Kratom is not up to snuff as other testing is for heroin, methamphetamines, and those things. And there's still a perception in the sobriety recovery community that they can still get away with this. Somewhat like if they drink just a little bit, maybe they won't fail a urine screen the next morning or whatever. And the perception is that if they're not tested within a window of opportunity that they can catch those, they're skating by, and they're not really in recovery. They're just not. They're just walking a fine line of a road to overdose and too often death in our community. So
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time
Sure.
speaking with us.
Thank you.
And kind of like on the note of what Rick is saying, addiction isn't just as simple as quitting drugs. I mean, you have several aspects to it. You have a physical addiction, you have, a spiritual problem, and you have a emotional, mental problem. And we have these people coming out of treatment that get rid of the physical addiction, and they still have to work on themselves, going to IOP, going through outpatient, all those types of things. And it's crazy that they're passing by and seeing this Kratom sold everywhere. I guess what I'd like to do is open up to anybody or any council members that have any questions or any.
I don't have a question, just my thoughts and certainly my encouragement to those of you who are struggling, that you continue to work on your sobriety. Your loss to our community would be devastating. It is a loss. You may not recognize how valuable you are, but your family does. And so please work hard. I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, I'm sure I can elicit a second, that we send this information to our legal counsel, ask him to write an ordinance and propose that to the full council, that this substance be made illegal in this parish for sale or use. Because we're not going to solve the problem of Kratom in Ascension Parish when we say you can't buy it here, because you can buy it across the parish lines. So I think we also need to make sure that the usage becomes criminal, so that when we find it on people in our parish that have bought it outside of it, we have a leg to stand on for them.
We have an avenue to get them to help.
And we have an avenue to get them to help. I hate to criminalize the usage, I really do, but it's in order to save these folks from themselves, we're going to have to. And look, this has been an eye-opener for me. My stepson struggles, and I've never heard that term, so I'm going to be wondering now if this is where some of the problems are coming from. So thank you for having the courage to come, and we will respond. And I cannot imagine that the parish of Ascension would not outlaw this.
Can I get a second?
I did, but I will do it again. Second.
So third? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll move this to the full council after our legal draws up an ordinance to be voted on at that time. So motion passes. Actually, any objection? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. All right, well, with that, we'll move back to agenda item B. Discussion of further details of the Home Rule Charter Amendment to limit the terms of Ascension Parish Council members and the Ascension Parish President as requested by the full council. This is something that we moved to the full council. Seemed like we had some, it seemed like everybody was for the idea. We just needed to kind of put some things together. So I want to open that up to discussion and see what everybody thinks. So. And if y'all want me to start, I can start. I guess my thing is, before we were looking at doing, 4-year terms? Four?
Yeah.
Four, and then we talked about four four-year terms. And I mean, that is too much. I agree, and it's not really solving the problem. Now, one of my fellow councilmen, Dempsey, had brought up the idea of doing a 6-year terms. And we had kind of toyed with the idea of 3 6-year terms, but you still have your same amount of years. So after that, we've had some more discussions, and obviously we need to, I haven't spoken with everyone on the council about this, but talked to a few people that would support 2 6-year terms. So I just want to kind of get feedback from my fellow committee members and
yeah.
see what your thoughts
I
are.
mean, I'm vehemently opposed to a 6-year term. I think we need to stick with 4 years. If we need to do 4 years, I'm leaning more towards that than a 6-year term, because, I mean, I understand the point that Councilman Lambert was making is, you know, we start these projects and you want to see them come to fruition, and I understand that. And that's why I think that was why we kind of pushed for the longer terms. But, I mean, 4 years is a big commitment, honestly. And 6 years is an even huger commitment. So I would say I would be more apt to doing 4 years than anything with 6 years. But my ideal is 3 4-year terms. That's mine.
3 4 year?
If we were to do it at all.
Ms. Castro?
So, you know, I'm kind of with Michael on this. I'm a 3 4 year term kind of person. I mean, but I also want to discuss a little bit with people that, you know, you are term limited. Everybody's term limited by the citizens of their district. And you do not have to run if you feel like you have done your work and you no longer have either the fire in your belly or the passion for it, whatever you want to call it. You can term limit yourself, and which certainly is something that, as all my fellow members of this council know, I have decided I'm going to do. It's time for me to go. And and that was after 12 years. So I'm a little concerned about whether if we're trying to fix a problem that has a solution already, and that is that people can not vote you back into office, or you can resign if you, or you cannot run if you feel like you've done your work. But I have never opposed putting something before the public for a vote, and I will not oppose putting this before the public for a vote. I'm not comfortable. I don't know about the 6-year thing. That's a long time. But if it was 2 6-year terms, I could probably be comfortable with that too. So, you know, whatever there's some consensus that will form here, and maybe even more consensus that'll be achieved at the council level. And so I would move this forward in some fashion for a vote. I'm not too concerned at this point about what the actual limits are.
Okay. How about yourself, Coach?
Well, I'd like to just piggyback on what Ms. Terry said. I don't oppose of bringing it to the people, allowing the people to decide whether they want to change it or whether you want to keep it as it is, you know.
I mean,
But,
I
again-
agree with both of y'all. I mean, if we put this before the people and the people don't think it's necessary, then that's it. It's not necessary. As far as the 4-year and the 6-year terms, I'm good either way. I think that we should make that decision before we bring it to the council, because if we don't, you know, it'll just come back here. So if you would like to submit your motion, Terry, at the 4 years, we could entertain that.
I would move that we recommend that we put before the people for a Home Rule Charter amendment to limit the terms of the council and the parish president
Yes.
to 3 4-year terms.
I'll second that.
Any objection? Motion passes. Now, C, approval to send to the full council a request to ask Attorney General's opinion of levying a fine on any council member censured by a vote of the council. Honestly, I did not remember this was still on the agenda. I think we've already discussed this, if
How
y'all are
much
good
do
with
you
it.
want to put up?
Well, what he wants,
You know,
what he wanted to do is,
we could do
so
it.
what we had in the meeting, the discussion we had in the meeting, it was myself, Joel, and Corey. What we said was, we just wanted to get the AG's opinion on whether or not that's even something that is worth looking into on our part, because we don't even know if we can do it.
Yeah.
I think, look, I would be happy to make a motion that we request from the AG an opinion on whether or not the council could levy a fine on any member of the council
I'll
that
second
has
that.
been censured.
Yeah.
And I
Coach,
want
you
to,
want a
say something about censure while while the mic's on me. That's not something anybody takes lightly on this council. It might be on any council, I'm sure in any governing body, because we all know each other. We all are empathetic to each other, and we know how difficult the work is and how sometimes unappreciated the work is and how complicated it can be and how many competing interests there are. And so choosing to censure a councilman has never been an easy decision. And it certainly should not be something that we even think about very often, you know. I think on the two occasions that it was done, it was needed. I think that it's just not something we want to encourage a lot of. It does not look good on the body of the council, nor does it reflect well on the individual who is censured. So I just think that it's something we need to be very cautious in using.
And I'm going to go ahead and kind of move more toward that view, considering the climate that we've had here in the recent months. I feel that this council has come together a lot more than it did before, and we don't have as much of the, back and forth bickering, unproductive arguing as we did before. So if we have a first and a second, we have not a first, we have a motion and a second, motion by Terry, second by Coach, just to get the AG's opinion. And maybe in the future, if we may have a cause for it, we could think about it again, but.
Personally, I don't think we need, I'm happy to make the motion, let's go find out what it is, but I hope we don't ever need to implement something like that. It's just not, it should not be necessary. Look, you and I know, in your case, it was not about something that went on up here.
Yeah.
It was certainly something totally different.
And that's why I brought it up, because I should have paid money for my case, I'm not gonna lie. I should have had a little bit more penalty.
Yeah, right, but we're not children here.
That's right.
And taking away our allowance is probably not what we need to do. I think what I want people to understand is that if you get censured, you should feel badly about that, because, and so does the body that has to do it, because everybody knows how hard this is.
So you get an allowance too? I don't get an allowance.
Well, I get a little bit of allowance, but what I pay myself.
That's right.
But anyway, so
Any-
thank y'all for listening, but
Yeah. Any
I
more questions,
don't
Howard?
object to sending it forward.
Okay, well, motion passes. I appreciate y'all. Do we have another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
We can't do that. I need a second. I'm not doing it.
Second.
All right, we got a second. Thank you.